What are the secrets behind a great speech? I'm here with Professor of Rhetorics, Jens Kjeldsen, and I'll pass that question right over to you, Jens. What is the secret behind a great speech?
A great speech is a speech that changes the world. I don't necessarily mean changes the world in a big way. It might be changes the world within your family or in your company, but a great speech is a speech that, grips into the world and changes in some way, and does it by changing the way that people think, what they feel, and perhaps most importantly, what they do when they've heard the speech.
So eloquence in its own right is not enough?
No, it's not enough, unless what you want to achieve by, changing the world is making people think, oh my God, he is so eloquent. If that's the goal, then you've changed the world because you've changed how people perceive you. But normally you have to be more than just eloquent. That's also why many people say, oh, it's just rhetoric. Because what they mean is you're just talking, but you're not doing anything. So a good speech does something.
And you have had a long career now in rhetorics.
Yes.
And you've worked with politicians, with business people, with students. Is there one criteria for a good speaker?
A good speaker is a person that knows what she or he wants and have thought through, can I achieve this with my words, with doing a speech? So that's one good criteria. The other one is don't say too much. Stick to one specific theme. And the last thing you could say is that a good speaker is a speaker that makes you see things, makes you hear things, that activates the senses by telling good stories, drawing pictures with words, that engages you and involves you in what you're talking about. That's a good speaker. Because if you don't do that, you're not going to change anything.
And you're also an expert on visual communication.
Yes.
And how do you draw those pictures in people's minds? What do you have to do?
Well, first you have to imagine it yourself. And, even the ancient rhetoricians, Aristotle, Cicero talked about this. They say what you do is it's like a 3-step road. So first you imagine it in yourself, then you say it, and when you say it, because you're imagining it, when you see pictures, it will influence your own body and the way you talk, and then that will influence the audience. So if you talk about something that's dear to you, you have to imagine in your mind a good episode from your life.
So it's not just like acting. It goes beyond that. You actually have to be there mentally.
Exactly. It is a kind of acting because I'm playing a role, but I'm playing a role as myself in my own life. I mean, many of us who've written speeches will sometimes be very touched by our own speeches. And I think you should be. I mean, if you're not touched yourself, because this is important to you, it becomes pretty hard to touch anybody else.
What is the best speech you have ever heard?
That's very difficult because it depends again on what a good speech is. But one speech that made a huge impression on me was a speech by Barack Obama in 2008, because Obama's Reverend Pastor Jeremiah Wright had been saying things about America that were derogatory. He's been saying things about the divide between blacks and whites in America, and people found that these kinds of comments very hostile. And the advisors to Obama said that he was not supposed to comment on that because this would be too big, it would be too difficult, so he shouldn't say anything about it. But then he chose to do a speech on race, and he called it A More Perfect Union, and it was about how we should deal with the issue of race in the United States. And he talked about it in a big way, about the big things we had to do, but he also talked about his own mother. And he talked about how she was afraid of black men, and if a black man was walking down the street, she would change from the pathway and go to the other side of the street. So he combined the very big picture with the very small incidents that we can actually feel and sense. Like an old elder woman changing to the other side of the road because she's seeing a black man.
And he was personal.
He was very personal. That's the issue.
Is that a criterion for a good speaker as well? You dare to be personal?
Very often it is. Very often it is, because one of the most convincing things is the person, him or herself. But of course, these days we have a lot of sentimentality, and people also get a little worn out with all the personal stories.
So if you're a business leader, you shouldn't necessarily include a picture of your family in the talk.
No, you shouldn't, unless it would be suitable and unless it would prove some sort of argument. I mean, I sometimes use my family and I talk about my family, or at least people think I talk about my family, but generally I just mention them so they can get the sense that Jens is actually a human being with a family, and they think I say a lot about my family, but I really don't. I just give sort of a picture of who I am and who my family is, and I always try to use it as part of my argument.
And you have a past. You've also
Don't we
been
all?
a travel guide.
Yes.
Yeah. And as a travel guide, you had to talk to lots of different people. You had to be effective in your communication. What did you learn from being a travel guide that is relevant now about speaking?
I learned to listen. Sometimes we would have dinners, huge dinners with a lot of people and entertainment, and I would sit among my guests. So I would sit with the person all night, and I would ask this person questions. So this person, my guest, very nice people, they would be talking, and I would say next to nothing about myself, not because I didn't want it to, but because they talked a lot. And when they left, they always said, "Oh, it was so nice talking to you." And they this sounds a little bit weird, but they liked me, I think, because they were allowed to talk for themselves. So I think I learned that. And I also learned that there are many different people, because that's what you learn when you listen to people. And if you want to persuade someone, you have to know who they are, what makes them tick, what are their values. And how do you do that? You listen. So you have to listen to talk. That's very important.
And then you have worked also for many years with students, young people. What do you see as the most common challenge when it comes to public speaking?
With young people?
Yes.
They talk a lot about themselves. And sometimes that's very relevant, because the difficult things they might be going through is something that they might share with many other people. So in that case, that's very good. Young people are becoming much better at actually presenting. So when we started out with teaching young people, they were pretty good at argumentation, but they were very insecure in the presenting part. It seems to have moved the other way now, because in schools nowadays, they have much more presentation technique, but they're not as good as they used to be on the argumentation part, which goes to show argumentation is not enough, but also, being very confident in your presentation is also not enough. You have to have a good argument, and you have to have a confident presentation.
Content or style, if you had to put your heart into one of them?
Oh, that's the ancient question. Of course, I have to say both, but if I was forced, I would say content. Yeah. Also, because think about it, when do you feel like a good speaker, or when do you feel you're doing well in a debate? When you feel that you actually know about this, and I care. When I feel I know about things that I'm talking about, and I really care about it, I get like this. I lean in, and I get much more eloquent because I know what I'm talking about. So in a sense, it's also it's not a contradiction really, because your style gets better if you know what you're talking about. So that's rule number one.
And then our tool is words. And
Yes.
how do you know what words to choose? Which words work?
Oh, that's very difficult. I mean, I've worked with these things for a long time, and finding the right words are very difficult. But I think it's important that it has to come from you. Sometimes when you see political speech writing, that people would go to documents and get words, and that doesn't work, because then it's not a human being talking. They picked up the words and the sentences from documents that were meant to be read. So what I do is I just write. I write down a lot of stuff, and I'm completely uncritical about my own words. So you get into, like when you talk with a person and you get energized and you talk, and a lot of things comes out, and some things are very good, some things are not so good. But when you do that, what you do then is you lean back and you remove all the bad stuff and you condense the good stuff.
How do you know what's the bad stuff?
I think one rule is you just sense it because you know instinctively.
Doesn't sound good.
Yeah, exactly. You have to read it aloud, and then you can see if it's good. But also, you have to think, what do I want to achieve? So maybe you have a fabulous story, but it doesn't achieve what you want to achieve. So it's a good story, but it's a bad argument, so you have to remove it.
You work with business people as well, and PowerPoint is a well-known and much-used device. What do you think of the way PowerPoint is used?
I think we have a lot of death by PowerPoint. I mean, the weird thing is we go to presentations and we listen to people delivering PowerPoints and we think, oh, that's a little bit boring. And then you go home and you do the same thing. It's a very weird thing. But the reason I've actually done research on this on university teaching, the reason we do it is because it's easier.
Right.
So we have the PowerPoint deck and we pull it out, and then I'm going to do a new presentation or a new class, and we just put in a few extras. So it's very easy. But what you don't do is you don't rethink what you want to say, what do I want to achieve. And what PowerPoint also does, it cuts everything into bits and pieces. So let's say you have a connected argument, and now you have to present this in a PowerPoint. So you show one picture, and in each picture you have points. So now cut it into big pieces, and you cut the big pieces into smaller pieces, and then you destroyed argumentation, you destroyed narration and stories. So I'm not saying you shouldn't use it, but you should be much more careful than most people are.
And then from everything that you have done research on, from all your own experience, what's the best advice you can give to a person who's going to give a talk?
Can I give 3?
Okay.
So prepare. You have to prepare. Everything gets much better if you prepare. And the second thing is, be very careful about finding out what you want to achieve. Because you go up and you talk and you haven't really thought through.
What if my boss just tells me you have to make a speech?
Well, then you have to challenge your boss. You have to say, why are we doing this speech? Should we do a lottery instead? Should I sing a song? What are we trying to achieve here? And that's a very good point, because many people are forced to do speeches that does nothing, so they shouldn't be doing them. So you have to think, what can I do? And you have to think, what can I achieve and how should I achieve it? And then you should stick to one main message. One main message.
So that's number 3. One main message is necessary.
Yes.
Not more.
No.
Thank you so much for coming, Jens.
You're welcome.
Thank you.